Good morning, everybody. We are back. We are back. We are back. Happy Saturday. It is time. It is time for House Talk Pregame. I am your sports mental health empowerment coach, Dr. Lauren Pitts. I have with me this morning, and Ronnie, I'm so sad because today's Carla's last week with us until till I send her the schedule for the rest of the shows, and she decides whether the shows she's going to join us for. So glad to have you all back with us today, Ronnie Ransom, Carla Debro. What amazing co-hosts you guys are. You make this work so much easier, and I have so much fun with you week in and week out. And we have fun with you all, the viewing and listening audience, and the feedback that we get about the show, and all the love that you all show us on social media to let us know that you appreciate what we're doing, to let us know that you hear us, that we are adding value to you, and that these topics that we're sharing week in and week out are impacting you and your family. And that's what HT Pregame is all about. It's all about family. It's all about your family. It's all about our family. It's all about the HBCU community and Black and Brown communities all over the nation and all around the world. It's about our Heritage Sports Radio Network family and how much they mean to us and the work that they're doing in sports in the HBCU realm, week in and week out. And if you don't have that Heritage Sports Radio Network app on your device, you need to go ahead and get it. You can download it for free through the App Store. Just put in Heritage Sports Radio Network, get that. You can hear us at this same time every Saturday, 11 a.m. We're also on HSRN on Saturday evenings at 10 p.m. and then again on Sunday evenings at 6. You don't want to miss this show. This information is powerful. We provide tons of valuable information to help you and your family, student and professional athletes and their families, and just everybody. Oh my goodness. Our focus is sports, mental health, and we get into academia and all of that. But this information that we share week in and week out is really applicable whether you're a scholar athlete or a family member or a friend or a coach or whomever you are. This information that we share week in and week out is applicable, period, because we talk about relationships. We talk about relationships within the context of sports, within the context of mental health, and we know that this is information that you all can apply to your life to help you to make well-informed decisions, to help you to make life-transforming decisions, to help you to enhance your performance if you're the athlete, and to help you to enhance your support if you're connected to the scholar or the professional athlete. So we want you to continue to tune in, to continue to join these discussions, and let us know that what we're sharing with you week in and week out is impacting your life. Ronnie, let them know what we're giving them today. Look, we're about to hose them in the face today.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Good morning. Welcome back for another beautiful Saturday. I don't know how it is in Texas. And Carla, you in Georgia, right?
No, I am in beautiful Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
Oh, I don't know what the weather's like in Texas and Maryland, but for the last 3 days in Virginia, it has been beautiful.
Same here.
We welcome everybody back. So before I get into what we're talking about today, I want to give another quick update for our other co-host, Jared Johnston. I just want to report to everybody that they won again last night.
Yes!
They are number one in the region in Northern Virginia. Yes. I believe they have one more game to go before they start the playoffs. So shout out to Jared and the Garfield football team for remaining undefeated and number one in the region. Shout out to you, Jared. We can't wait to get you back on the show. But
you need to bring the team.
Huh?
When you talk to Jared, look, because he communicate with me via text. I haven't actually talked to him since the season started. But when he comes back, he's gonna need to bring the captains of the team with him. When they win this championship, I want him to bring the captains. I want him to come on the show and bring the captains on the show so that they can tell us about their experience with, having the season move from fall to spring. And we want to hear
from them. That would be dope. Yeah. We need that. Yeah. I'm going to let him know. I'm going to let him know that today. That would be dope. Yeah. So, shout out to Jared. I'm gonna let y'all know right now, Dr. Pitts, I've already talked to Jared. When they start the playoffs, I'm the backup center. So I might be absent for a show or two. I might need to rehab afterwards because it's been about 6 years. I told Jared I ordered some cleats and shoulder pads last night. So, I'm ready. Jared, if you're listening to this right now, like I said, I'm on standby, man. 95 North ain't nothing but a hop, skip, and jump away. All right. So look, we got a great topic today. Our topic for today is sports, academics, and inequality. So multiple forms of inequality are maintained within the athletic academic conflict. Sports participation and academic success are not mutually exclusive. The education attainable through sports can be incredibly valuable in other arenas of life. So why is there an achievement gap between African-American athletes and their white counterparts in college sports? Specifically in football, there's almost a 27% gap in the graduation rate amongst Black student athletes and white student athletes on football teams for Division I. So why is there such a large gap? What is the relationship between Black student athletes' retention and graduation rates at predominantly white institutions compared to HBCUs? So we're also going to be talking about, as a student athlete, if you're getting ready to graduate high school this June and go to college, what's going to be the best degree for you? Potentially moving forward in a world that's always changing, becoming more technical and technology driven. So what are some of the degrees out there and majors out there that will put you in the best position forward for having a lucrative career after your student athlete career is over? So we're going to be talking about all those things today. Amongst, as always, me and Dr. Pitts take each week to give you all a mental health tip of the week. So I will go first this week. My mental health tip is, last Saturday was the first day of spring. So my mental health tip of this week is talking about getting sunlight and the benefits of sunlight. So some of the benefits of getting sunlight are release of serotonin, which is the chemical in your brain that improves your mood, improves brain functioning and help reduces stress, can have healthier sleep patterns, can heal skin and strengthen bones, boost your immune system, increases energy and productivity, and also can reduce the risk of cancer and heart disease. So, we talk about all the time, when we talk about when winter time shows up, it gets darker earlier outside. So more people are inside longer. And because of that, we have where people will suffer from seasonal depression and other seasonal mental health diagnoses due to wintertime and things like that. Also, particularly people who live in the Northwest of the United States, such as Seattle, Washington, Oregon, and things like that, where literally 2/3 of their year is overcast and rain. They don't have a lot of opportunities for sunlight, which you see in those areas has a higher risk of people suffering from depression and other, negative mental diagnoses. So the importance of getting sunlight is, like I said, you want to help improve your mood, and serotonin is that chemical in your brain that helps improve your mood and reduces anxiety, depression, and things like that. So Ronnie, how long should you be in the sun? I would say, depending on your health and your skin tone, of course, the more melatonin in your skin, the more protection you have against the sun in a sense. But, depending on your health and your skin level and your activity level, I would say the bare minimum 20 to 30 minutes in the sunlight, if you can tolerate that, to help boost. So when you're sitting in the sunlight, I forgot to mention this, when you're sitting in the sunlight, your body produces what we call vitamin D. And if everybody's familiar with vitamin D is one of the most important nutrients and things you can have in your body. Vitamin D also has been shown to improve moods, improve your mental health mood overall as well. So getting more vitamin D in your body can help improve your overall mood, can help with other ailments as well, other physical and mental ailments as well. So as the weather improves outside in your area, please go outside at least for 20 and 30 minutes, sit out in the sun, bring a book with you, turn some music on, put up a shade or whatever, kick back, relax. If you want to go for a walk, that's fine too. I'm not sitting there saying you got to do physical activity outside, but at least go outside and sit in the sun, relax, listen to the birds chirp and all that good stuff. So that is my mental health tip for the week. Please get outside, get some of this good sun before it gets too hot outside. Because once it gets above 90, your boy gonna be inside. I'm just gonna let y'all know that right now. Your boy gonna be inside once it's over 90 because that humidity is no joke. So, that's my mental health tip of the week.
Is that why when you go to the doctors, doctors say that blacks have usually have vitamin D deficiency because we don't
Yeah,
go outside doing this? Because I don't.
and
I love
actually,
the sun.
it's been shown. I've talked to doctors before. Most doctors would say over 95% of the population has a vitamin D deficiency. Because a lot of people don't go outside as much as they should to get that. And, they have supplements to help with vitamin D and stuff like that. But the sun is the best prescription for getting vitamin D if you can tolerate it. If you cannot tolerate it, if you burn easily, if you get hot easily, if you got asthma or something like that, I'm not saying force yourself outside. Hopefully you and your doctor have talked about other methods of getting vitamin D and stuff like that to boost your overall mood and stuff like that. But if you can go outside, please go outside and enjoy some of this good sun and this good weather. So that's my tip for the week. Dr. Pitts, what you got for us this week?
Well, first I want to tell you the high for today in DFW is 79 degrees. And
Okay, that's perfect right there. That's perfect.
see, I absolutely positively love hot weather. It's my favorite time of the year. It tunes into my Caribbean heritage. I get my Caribbean copper that comes out. My skin is
Caribbean copper.
amazingly, yeah, baby. My skin, we gonna market that.
There you go.
My skin gets this beautiful copper penny. It's just beautiful, and I'm like, yes, I love to be hot. My
Hey, Dr.
fiance on the
Fitz.
yes, ma'am.
Dr. Fitz. Ronnie's just getting flashbacks from preseason football.
I really am.
That's
That's
what's
the
going
pants
on.
out.
Look, it was 88 degrees here yesterday, and it felt like 97, and I was just like, no, I'm not ready for these every August I get flashbacks. I suffer PTSD every August. I swear.
That's what's
Every
going on.
August.
Yeah, I read that.
PTSD, you're athletic PTSD kicking in.
Yeah, from August to November, I have PTSD every single year.
For me, the hotter the better. I tell folks, when I was living in Barbados, sitting on the equator I loved it. I
It's no joke.
positively love hot weather. I'd rather be hot than cold any day. So I'm gonna tell you now. I want y'all to grab your seat. Hold on, real tight, because I'm about to hose you in the face real quick with my tip for the week.
Uh-oh.
So yeah, here we go. So what's been coming up for me a lot, and I'm like, I know part of it I believe is part of COVID and what have you, but I've been getting a lot of questions about, you ready? How to get over exes. I told you, hold on. How
Ooh.
to get over exes, and people, they talking about the old cliche. Well, I heard the best way to get over one is to get under another, and you got to go out and you got to have fun. You got to do all these things. So I've been actually addressing this from a holistic, strength based, and solution focused approach to healing. It's not about getting over the ex, it's about healing one's heart. And I can't even tell you all, I literally have wanted to punch myself in the face this week because one of my work on total transparency here is I hate repeating myself. It drives me nuts. So you can imagine in this work, I repeat myself all the time. So it has me constantly doing the self work to not be judgmental or critical or short patient, have minimal patience with my clients and what have you. But there's this recurring theme that I want to bring to everyone's attention, and it ties into a much deeper issue. You have, if I had to pick the work that I love the most to do in behavioral and mental health, it is my family based work and the couples and the relationship work, whether it's marriages or boyfriend and girlfriends or premarital counseling, what have you. I absolutely positively love the work. The recurring theme, though, is you have people that are not giving themselves time to heal before they enter another relationship and another relationship and another relationship and another relationship and another relationship. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And then they come into treatment wondering, well, I'm getting ready. I'm in this relationship and I think I want to marry my girlfriend, or I think I want to marry my boyfriend, but I haven't seemed to get over my ex. And Dr. Pitts, what's wrong with me? What's wrong with you is you haven't healed. That's not a mental health issue. That's a behavioral issue. People are so afraid to be alone with themselves. They just have to be filling that void to a fault with other people. And guess what? They end up in the relationship with the same person over and over and over and over and over again. The only thing that changes is the person's name. Hello, folks. Ding, 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 ding. You're the common denominator in every one of these relationships. Stop talking to people about how this one dogged you and that one dogged you and the other one dogged you, and you don't know why. Everybody just keep messing over you, and you keep finding yourself in these situations. You keep finding yourself in these situations because you're broken to the core of your soul in some cases, and you're not giving yourself the opportunity to heal. You have to heal. It is not fair. It is not, matter of fact, it's a miscarriage of justice to go into a relationship having feelings or being anchored to another person, professing your love to the person that you're with, and you think that you're ready to be married. Are you kidding me? No, you're not ready to be married. And here's a newsflash. You're not even ready to be in a relationship. You're not. Stop continuing on this vicious cycle and thinking that somehow, miraculously, this time it's all going to be better. It doesn't work that way. You have to do heart and relationship rehab just like you would if you had a broken bone, a broken limb, or if you're like me and got rotator cuff surgery coming up, or whatever the case is. You're going to have to go through rehab. You have to give yourself time to heal. Otherwise, stop questioning. Stop questioning your mama, your papa, your baby daddy, your baby mama, your boo and everybody else. Stop questioning folk about why this keep happening to you. This keeps happening to you because you're not healed. And you have no interest in being healed because you're afraid to be alone with yourself.
Y'all see why I go first for my tips? Y'all, do y'all see why now? Do y'all see why? And Dr. Pitts, I want to add something to that because you made a very good point. And I'll be honest with you. I even have this conversation with some of my male clients, my teenage male clients all the time too. And I've always told people, like, I feel like when it comes with relationships and stuff like that, I feel like you need to experience heartbreak one good time. One good time, because I've seen where they say, you have 3 people that you love as far as relationships and stuff like that. The first one is, the puppy love. The second one is where you put the real effort in and you really start to work on the changes. And that third person you love is the person that you're supposed to be with. But, and to your point, I can't tell you how many times, how many friends I've had who will bounce from relationship to relationship, especially guys. And people don't realize this. A lot of guys who suffer from attachment issues or struggle with, being able to be by themselves, they cling. And oftentimes guys, when they have these attachment issues, it's because of their, whether they didn't have a great relationship with their mother or they didn't get that closeness and that nurturing and stuff like that. So you see them, they look for in a woman what they couldn't get from their mom. Yeah. Whether it's emotional love, physical touch, things like that. They look for that in a female. And, especially when you're in your early teens and, early 20s, a lot of people, you get this puppy love and you think you're ready for marriage and things like that. And then the first real world problem happens and you're like, oh, nah, I don't think I'm ready for this. And so you see people where they have these expectations and, I'm pretty sure a lot of them get it from TV and stuff like that, where, marriage is just flowers and roses, being in a relationship, you're not supposed to argue. If you argue with somebody, that's not for you. If you have a disagreement, you're not supposed to be together. And, we really need to stop that. I always tell people a marriage is more like, and when I say this, like, when I mean like the closeness, a marriage is more like a brother and a sister in a sense where it's like y'all are around each other almost every single day. So you get used to that person. And sometimes that person does get on your nerves. Sometimes they do get annoying. But the biggest thing is that lack of communication is where a lot of issues arise at. And I tell a lot of my friends now, like, it used to be, 40 years ago, the average age of getting married was for females 19 and men 21. Now that's changed. Now for females, it's 30 and men, it's around 32. So I tell people, enjoy your 20s. If you're looking for a relationship, say that, communicate that. And guys, and I want to talk to my fellas real quick because I have this conversation with females all the time. And females, I want you to understand this. Not every dude out here is trash and just trying to cheat and mislead you and stuff like that. I don't know if y'all keep up with social media like that, but this entire week there was a social media influencer guy by the name of Derek Jackson who considers himself a relationship expert, and then come to find out he done cheated on his wife with 2 or 3 other women, and they'll put him on blast all week. And he actually just came out with a relationship book this week. So it's kind of ironic. And the name of his book was Healing Through Hurt. So it's kind of ironic. So fellas, I want you to understand something. If you're looking for a relationship, if you're looking for somebody to settle down with, open your mouth. As quick as you can undo your pants and pull them down and pull your private parts out, open your mouth and communicate with that person what you're looking for and what your expectations are. Oftentimes I see a lot of dudes will sit there and they'll mislead a woman and tell them everything they want to hear just to get in their pants or just to use them for that quick second, and boom, they bounced on. And oftentimes the female is left hurt, or vice versa. I've seen it happen to dudes as well.
Look, I was about to tell you. Look, we got arsenals too.
I always say a female who just doesn't care, who can emotionally disassociate themselves, that's dangerous. That is very dangerous.
I was that chick. I had the 3F rule, Ronnie. I'm not gonna say it on air, but I had a 3F rule.
If you know, you know. I know what you're talking about. I feel you. But I mean, communication is the biggest thing for young people who are in relationships and they feel like, oh, this might go to the next level. To your point, Dr. Pitts, I was that 18-year-old kid who, I had a high school sweetheart and I thought I was ready for marriage and all that type of stuff. And then we got to our first year of college and that just went into the dust. But you learn to communicate, you learn to put yourself first. And, oftentimes, to your point, a lot of people do not love themselves first. And I always tell people, you cannot get love from anybody else. You can't get care, love, anything until you do it for yourself. Because if you go around looking for people to fill that void in your heart, to give you love that you can't give yourself, it will never be enough. You will always sit there like, well, they can give me more, or they can do more, or they should do more. And when you get to that point, you've missed the entire point. You're going to push good people away out of your life.
Right.
So you're asking people of something that no one person should have to carry the burden for.
Absolutely. And people always, Will Smith has this famous quote, even though Will Smith is not the greatest example for this message, but he did have a good quote. He was like, your happiness is not my responsibility, just like my happiness is not your responsibility.
Right.
We should both be happy and bring that happy together. And that's how a partnership is. That's how a relationship should be. I should bring something to the table. My wife should bring something to the table. And when we meet in the middle, it is a benefit for both of us. It shouldn't be, I'm unhappy, but my wife's happy. But when we come together, now I'm happy. But as soon as she goes away or as soon as she's not around, I'm not happy with myself. I'm dissatisfied with myself. That relationship will not work, people.
And that's called conditional love. Unconditional love versus conditional love.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Loving yourself conditionally. That way, no matter what anybody else does, I'm still happy because I'm happy whether or not you're here or there.
Absolutely. And if you're one of those people who feel the need to have to control the relationship because, like Dr. Pitt said, your fear of being alone, or your fear of being without somebody to share your life with, if you have those type of things going on, then come holler at me and Dr. Pitts.
Yeah.
Please come holler at us, because until you learn to love yourself and have self-love and self-worth, you won't get that in return from anybody else. I don't care who it is. They can come in your life and tell you everything you want to hear, do every single thing that you want on your checklist, and it still won't feel enough. You'll still have that emptiness. You'll still have those flutters like, it don't feel right. They should be doing more. They should be doing this and they should be doing that. They could do everything you want them to do, but until you learn to accept yourself and love yourself, it won't happen. Well, so don't go into these relationships in your early 20s with these high expectations that you don't even hold yourself for.
Right.
Please stop doing that. And fellas, have fun, but be real. For all the fellas out here talking about I'm real, I tell the truth all the time, I don't lie, y'all are lying. Y'all are lying. I used to be that dude who would tell a female anything they needed to hear so I could get what I needed and get gone. All right? Stop. Communicate. Because oftentimes, you never know. A female might be like, okay, cool, we can be friends. We can hook up and stuff like that. Now, I will say this real quick. Friends benefits don't last forever. All right? Don't let somebody tell you different. Eventually, somebody will catch feelings. If it's that good and y'all keep coming back to each other, somebody gonna catch feelings. All right? But if two consenting adults make a decision to just be friends and have extra benefits on the side, communicate, and be real with yourself. Fellas, stop breaking these girls' hearts. Women, stop trying to get back at these dudes because somebody got you first.
So we got a couple minutes before we transition into the topic, because when you said that, it made me, you said something powerful. People, both male and female, regardless of what the relationship dynamic is intimately, they're afraid to tell the truth. Mm-hmm. And what I used to always say is, don't make the assumption that I'm not going to want to play according to your rules. Right. Don't make that assumption, because you're assuming that, because let's keep it real. There was a point in time in my life where I was totally okay sharing. I didn't have a problem, but this is the problem I ran into. So oftentimes men were totally okay, wanting to do them, but they didn't want me to do me. Well, mm-hmm. I'm okay, Lauren, with you sharing me, but I don't want to share you. Okay, well, Lauren alpha. So that ain't gonna work. That didn't work for me in my heyday. So I always said, don't dish out anything that you can't handle, because it's not about revenge or anything like that. For me, it was, I remember my cousin, actually, he said this to me just within the past year or so. We were having a conversation, and he told me that I made him sick because he said, ever since we were kids, you always thought like a doggy dude. He was like, that's your problem. You think like a dude. And I said, where I get that from? Who had taught me how to think like a doggy dude? Do you know who my family members are? So I had this great example of this inappropriate behavior. But to your point, Ronnie, that honesty is such a critical piece, but people don't want to do that. And I think that it's dishonesty that's also rooted in selfishness. It's like, absolutely, you want to have your cake and eat it too, but you don't want to share your cake. And
there you go.
Puts folks at a disadvantage, and that's not cool. The other thing that I wanted to say on this point, and then Carla, I'll pass to you because I know you had something you wanted to say about it so we can move on, is that the other thing that ties into this that continues to come up is people not only trying to fill that void, not only recognizing that they have healing that they have to do in and of themselves, but to your point, Ronnie, people trying to make withdrawals from other people who are emotionally bankrupt. Two broken people do not a whole person make. And we're magnets. As human beings, we're magnets, and we attract to ourselves people that either affirm all of the goodness and excellence that's representative of the quality of our life, if you're not living a toxic life. But the flip side of that is we also have the ability to attract to us those people that validate the low opinion that we have of ourselves. So you have all of these people out here that are totally okay being in these toxic, unhealthy, debilitating relationships because they don't love themselves properly. When people say, Dr. Pitts, well, but I love him, and I said, well, what is it that you love? Do you love the fact that he or she validates the low opinion that you have of yourself? Because yes, everybody deserves love, but you are embracing toxicity as if that's the only thing that you have, and you're holding on to that for dear life. I can't tell you, Ronnie, how much just in the past week alone I have used the word codependency. I have shared more psychoeducation on codependency than the law should freaking allow, because people are holding on to cesspool relationships, rock gutter, drag, nasty, toxic relationships, just so they don't have to be by themselves, and wondering why they're leaving each of these cesspool relationships more broken than they were before. and talking about Dr. Pitts fix me.
It's crazy that level of self-worth is just, and you see it more and more nowadays, especially with social media for these, these younger kids and the younger generations. And I was just having this conversation last week. Social media has really, I think we kind of talked about this, it's one thing having peer pressure, especially when y'all were growing up, y'all were teenagers. When I was a teenager, the peer pressure we went through. And then nowadays you put that on a global platform like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Snapchat, where peer pressure is now a global thing. It's a global competition, especially amongst, and I just from observing, especially teenage females nowadays with, how you should look, how you should talk, what you should expect in a man, what you need to get out of a man and things like that. And for guys, wine and dining females just for the simple purpose of getting to their bodies and using their bodies for your pleasure and stuff like that. The peer pressure that these teenage kids are seeing nowadays, I think has been amplified so much because of social media that they have, a severely distorted reality of perception of how relationships should be. Yeah. And real quick, Carla, before you go, I just want to make one more point since we're on this topic. And this is a blanket statement for guys and girls, but I'm gonna start with guys first. Guys, real quick. I don't care the situation. I don't care what's going on. If a female says no, damn it, that means no. Yeah. No, no, no. And for males and females, if it's going left, if it's toxic, if it's getting too out of control, if you can't control your emotions in an argument or a bad situation, walk away. Do not put your hands on each other, because you will, if you put your hands on each other, I promise you, you have no control over how that person reacts. Women, I know you get frustrated. I know you get pissed off. I know he gets on your last nerve. Don't put your hands on him. Fellas, there ain't no excuse. All right. I don't care if she turned into baby Mike Tyson. I don't care if she get to swinging on you with the left hook and everything. Walk away. Walk away. It's not worth it. Keep your hands to yourself. Yeah. That's my last.
Read my mind. I was going to touch on that. You read my mind. So mic drop. Carla.
I can't improve on that knowledge. I can't. Other than the only thing I got to reiterate is the people that you meet, you're meeting yourself.
That's right.
So if you're meeting someone that's mean to you, that's treating you dirty, that means you're treating yourself dirty and you're not kind to yourself. So that's the only thing I have to say, because you guys were swinging the knowledge, man. I can't improve on that. I can't improve on that now.
Man, y'all ready?
We ready.
All right. So like we said, so this week's topic is sports, academics, and inequality. So before we get into the heavy stuff, I want to just give a backdrop for our audience out there and listeners to, what we're talking about here. So for those who don't know, so when you enter college as a student athlete, you essentially have 10 semesters to graduate. So that's 5 years. So you have 5 years to complete your degree, whether you're a scholarship student athlete or just a preferred walk-on, or you just trying out for the football team. You have 10 semesters from your first year in college to graduate on time before you can no longer participate in that sport. So what does that look like? Last week, we talked about, the rigors and things like that for student athletes, where, you're committing over 20 hours a week just to your activity, to your sport and things like that. And the remaining time you have for academics. So if everybody's held to the same standard for student athletes, why do we see such a large drop off in graduation and retention rates between African-American student athletes and their white counterparts? Like I said at the top of the show, there was a study done last year for the Division I football teams and the bowl teams. They looked at 56 teams who were playing in bowl games. Out of those 56 teams, the average graduation rate for the white student athletes on those football teams was at 89.7%. However, for their black teammates, the graduation rate was at 67% on average. So on average for a football team at the Division I level, Power 5 level specifically, out of 10 white student athletes on the football team, 9 of them are going to graduate on what they consider on time. So 10 semesters or less. For the black student athletes on the football team, they're graduating 6 out of 10 athletes on time. So, well, Ronnie, what happens if you don't finish your degree in those 10 semesters? Well, so if you're a student athlete and you don't finish within those 10 semesters, when you start semester number 11, you're no longer allowed to play that sport unless you have an NCAA waiver. And the only way you get that waiver is if it's a sports injury or I mean, some just, just unforeseen circumstance that required you to have an extra semester, whether it was, physical injury, something like that, whatever the case may be. But typically after 10 semesters, they tell you, hey, you've exhausted your eligibility. You can remain a student, but we will no longer fund you or be able to pay for you as a student athlete here. You would just be a student. So for me, when I was at Virginia State, Virginia State was a D2 school, but we still had the same standards. You had 10 semesters to graduate. I saw a lot of my teammates who would come in from junior colleges or would just try out and walk on. And like I said last week, a lot of them chose the easy major, which was health, physical education, gym, and stuff like that. They would just choose the easy major so they could get out of school. However, even by choosing that easy major, what I saw was a lot of my teammates still didn't graduate on time, or if they did graduate, it took, 6-7 years. I had a teammate who literally, he only participated in the fall because he was always ineligible for the spring semester. So he would always come out in the fall, do great, do just enough. But when the spring semester rolled around, he was ineligible, couldn't participate in football activities, couldn't do anything with us. And literally, he did not graduate. After our last season playing, he did not graduate. He had one semester left, but did not come back because he wasn't getting money for football. And so we see this, not only at the D2 level, but at the D1 level. And we talked about this last week, why is there such a big drop off for education for Black student athletes compared to white student athletes? And we bounced around some ideas. And, we talked about this being at, this is more of a macro situation than a micro situation, meaning that this starts at an early age. And we talked about last week, we talked about more in football regards than basketball. And Carla, you made a great point last week when we talked about, basketball student athletes and football student athletes. Whereas, for basketball, do you still have a lot of the top student athletes for basketball come from low income area and stuff like that? Sure, of course, out of the top 50, maybe a good 10 or 15 of them come from low income. But for the most part, a lot of these top basketball players have been in the AAU circuit since, they were 5-6 years old. So they come from, more well-off families, more middle-class families and upper-class families that can afford to send them to all these tournaments across the country, get them top trainers and things like that. For football, however, and I made this argument last week for football, I still think football has that old mentality of dangling that scholarship over your head and dangling the opportunity of going to the professional league, the NFL, by going through football. And they target a specific audience, being low-income families, specifically Black low-income families, because let's be real, you hear this narrative that, well, if you want to find an athlete, go to the hood. Go to the hood if you want to find an athlete. And as bad as that sounds, I mean, let's be real. A lot of our best athletes, a lot of our top athletes that we can think of for football, basketball, and stuff like that come from low-income areas. But like we talked about, sports don't last forever, especially football. The national league, for football, the average time you spend in the NFL is 2.3 years. NBA is about 3 or 4 years. So if you get into the NFL at 22 and you're out by 25, what are you going to do the rest of your life? What are you going to do for the next 50, 60 years?
Yeah.
Well, if you left school early, if you left college after 3 years to go pursue the NFL, made the NFL, got a 5th round contract, will probably put you at maybe 1 million that you've earned in your entire 3-year career. Well, what are you going to do? That 1 million ain't going to last the rest of your life. So what do we do? So let me start with you, Dr. Pitts. How do you feel about this disparity between the graduation rates amongst Black student athletes and white student athletes?
I think that it's a deeper issue that we have talked about time and time again that starts at the lower level of education. I think that those disparities exist all the way down to elementary. And if I could be so bold as to say, I think those disparities begin as early as preschool. When you look at, we know Head Start, for example, has been around for decades, right? But when you look at a Head Start program in an economically impoverished area compared to a Head Start that's not, there's some disparities there, the location, the quality of staff, and things like that. And I think that clearly there are excellent teachers at every level of education. However, I think that the problem that we have, and I actually touched on this in my dissertation, is that when you look at education at the lower levels, I think that there's a cultural component that's missing. I think that there is a lack of cultural sensitivity in public education that it reminds me of an incident, and I don't remember if I shared it on a previous show, but I was having a conversation with one of my college students, and she was talking about how she and her brother, they moved from a predominantly Black area to a predominantly white area when they were in middle school.
Mhm.
And they are from a middle class family. They're both bilingual, but they were so uncomfortable being in this predominantly white school where there wasn't a lot of people that looked like them. All of the teachers that they had were white, that they sort of became shrinking violets. Now, both of them really intelligent. It was so bad that that their teachers wanted to have them tested to see if perhaps they were on the spectrum or if there were some sort of cognitive deficiencies, not because they weren't excelling academically, because they were both doing relatively well academically, but because they weren't talking or being as vocal as she thought that they should be. And
Mhm.
when they tested them, off the charts, off the charts, academic, because brilliant, two very brilliant children, a year apart in school, multilingual, the whole nine yards. And then, folks want to apologize and tap dance, and it's like, how dare you? Why didn't you even entertain the thought first that perhaps there was a cultural deficit here and you should go the extra mile to make this Black child in a class full of white kids, and you, the white teacher, why didn't you go the extra mile to see how you could meet the child where they were culturally? Why didn't you present an opportunity for that child to share about their cultural experience? Because they weren't just Black. One of the parents is, US born and raised, the other one was Nigerian. Why didn't you
Mhm.
have that conversation? Why didn't you welcome that as a teachable moment and a learning opportunity? But that doesn't happen. It doesn't happen. I'm sure it might happen somewhere, but I feel like it doesn't happen enough. So when you look at all of the contextual variables that come into play, that being Black in this country looks like and feels like, and what the learning experience is, when you take into consideration that Black children are disproportionately diagnosed with ADHD. We've had the conversation before. Is it really ADHD or is it PTSD? Growing up poor and Black in this country is traumatic. What
Absolutely.
types of influences are these things having on the learning trajectory of these students from kindergarten all the way through high school? And then all of a sudden you get to college and you think that they're just miraculously supposed to be so successful. Well, yeah, a lot of us are. We
Mhm.
we are examples of what, life beyond circumstances, professionally, academically, whatever the case may be, looks like. But we're not the majority. We do not represent the majority. So, what true steps are being taken to bridge the achievement gap at the lower level of education so that when these students get into college, they can actually be successful, they can actually graduate on time? What considerations are being taken into all of let's just look at the racial tension in this country right now. Right now, I've got teenage clients on my caseload. The teenage clients that I have on my caseload right now just happen to be Black. And guess what? They're failing. It's not that they're from bad families or anything like that. And what the children are conveying to me, and they're from loving and supportive families, but what the children are conveying to me is between COVID and everything else that's going on in the world, Dr. Pitts, is too much.
Mhm.
It's too much. It's too,
Absolutely.
these kids, it's like on one hand, they're sick and tired of doing school on Zoom, but on the other hand, they sort of glad because they don't want to have to walk to school.
Yeah.
It's there's so many other really extreme factors that are coming into play. And just let's set the record straight to the viewing and listening audience, because we know that our whole audience is not Black.
Mhm.
We're not blaming white people. We're not saying that this is your fault. But what we're saying is there has to be a collaborative effort to bridge this gap. Black and brown parents need to put greater value on education And the persons that be, whether they be Black or brown, legislatively, Carla, I'm sure, is going to speak on her position on it where politics and stuff is concerned. It has to be a collaborative effort. There has to
Absolutely.
be a collaborative effort to reform the educational system in this country so it is structured in a way for all students to be successful. All students to be successful, K through graduating from college on time and being able to take into consideration some of the additional variables that come into play for Black and brown children that could potentially adversely impact their learning trajectory.
Well, I was a few weeks ago, I was reading a study where, when children come out the womb till the time that they reach a government school, they are at a genius level. Their creativity is off the charts. Their ability to reason, to think, and to understand ideas are just, they are at a genius level. And at the time that they be at school, oh, that was not proper English. By the time they reach school,
You're human, girl. You're human.
they are totally reconditioned to not think, to not dream. So there in itself, that's where our education system is there to create workers, not to create thinkers, uh, inventors. They're not there for those people, right? So by the time a kid is 10, that kid is unsure of themselves, hesitant, and totally brainwashed to be like everybody else. All right, so you think about our culture, the I would say the lowest form of our culture, that have a disdain, or a disdain for people who tend to want to learn. So if those people are picked on, called geeks, called squares, right? Where the cool folks have they talk a certain way, they have the pants down, and they're disruptive in class. Those are the cool folks. Now, so why would you ask someone to be courageous enough to step out of line and be smart and be creative when our school system is supporting her like material thinking?
Absolutely. That's a great
So
point.
so that's it. I mean that's where I think it is, because God gave all of us the creative gene to think and to create, right? But if you smash that,
Mhm.
if you smash that, that's what you're gonna get. So you go to college, you're playing ball, and really the student athlete that plays ball, that's where the creative juices flow. That's as close to God as that person can be, because God is in that movement. God is in the thought. God is in the shot. God is in that pass. So you go to college. That's the only thing you want to do is play basketball. So if you go to a bigger college, even a smaller college, you have not been taught to think outside the basketball court or the playing field. Matter of fact, school has been boring because all school has been for is to indoctrinate, not to teach you how to think, not to spurn imagination. That's not what school's been.
Mhm. Teaches you to be an employee as opposed to an employer.
Exactly. So that's what we got. That's what we have here, and we've lost all control of our local schools to the federal government. I totally think that I grew up in the South, and our curriculum was controlled by the community.
Mhm.
We had a
Uh,
strong board. So, I was taught that federal government bad. And I believe that, because you go to DC, how when you protest, Does anybody see it? I mean, they're almost roping off the city of DC. So you can't protest, right? But you can protest. We had a protest. One of our commissioners actually live in my neighborhood. They protested her house. That's where your power is. And that's at the lowest form of education. That's where we got to start, is gaining our schools back, gaining the power, not letting it be our curriculum be dominated by somebody in Washington, where they change curriculums depending on who their friends are every 3 years. There's nothing wrong with the classical curriculum, reading, writing, arithmetic, and let's throw some tech in there, or replace it, maybe have shop or critical skills. I don't know what you would call it, but there's nothing wrong with reading, writing, arithmetic. There's nothing wrong with that.
I think we got into I think that there are some problems that came into play with No Child Left Behind.
Absolutely.
That we see, and I, as a former educator, I remember the pressure being placed upon us to teach to the test. Yeah. It wasn't about educating, it was about teaching for these kids to be able to pass the test. Right. And Carla, you made a point about when you talked about the level of intelligence and kids coming in at genius level and how that's diminished over time. And it provoked my thoughts around what my lesson plans were for this whole week with my students. And all week I had my students working on the importance and the value of storytelling. And you made a comment about how things are shifted and they're moved away from some of those critical skills that they need to be successful at the college level. Well, one of the things that we talked about in class this week is how when you're little, particularly, you stop telling stories. That's not good. You're such a and there's this narrative that suggests that storytelling always has to be associated with lying, or that storytelling also has to be associated with something bad. When in actuality, the way my lesson plans were framed for this entire week was looking at the concepts of storytelling to the stories they share about themselves. And my lesson plan was, purpose that ultimately the skills would support their final product, which was me having them do a speak up. And the speak up was on their identity and what they perceive their purpose in life to be. And I encouraged them all week. They were practicing the art of storytelling by sharing the stories that they had written about themselves and the cultural components of their life's journey and how that has contributed to molding them and shaping them and preparing them for global leadership. So when you look at the story, and I'm going to reframe that in the form of when you look at each individual's narrative, right? What or how is that narrative, Carla, to your point, being diminished over time? That by the time these kids graduate from high school, by the time these kids get to college, they've got all this extraordinary academic ability or athletic ability. Their academic ability in too many instances has been diminished. So to your point, Carla, they get to college and all they want to do is play the sport, play the sport, play the sport.
Feels good.
Yeah, unless you're in a home that places an exorbitant amount of value on education, how can your focus be anything but? No, the system that you're a part of has diminished the value of education for you as a Black and brown student. You perhaps are in a family that doesn't even understand or respect the value of education, because now we're into a multi-generational systemic breakdown of the value that should be on education. And then you have these scholar athletes that it is ingrained in them that in so many cases, you know what, you're not the brightest kid on the block, but you sure can run. You sure can dribble,
Daydreaming has become a lost art too.
Yeah.
And
like it's a curse word. Stop
Yeah.
daydreaming.
Oh yeah. So, and people, you talk about the fact that, they say systemic um is it's an issue in the Black community because of slavery and whatever, Jim Crow. But my great grandmother, God bless her soul, she at 105, she died in the 1980s. Her parents were slaves and her grandparents were slaves. But she knew the importance of, number one, self-respect,
Mhm,
and the importance of education.
mhm,
So it's only within the last 50 years where that breakdown
mhm.
has formed, right? So
Keep the
in
body
fact,
strong and the mind weak.
exactly. So, the real question, I know, I talk to my friends about this, and we don't like to talk about it without there being some type of solution. And I mean, it goes around, well, what if you didn't have that? What if that kid doesn't have that? I'm gonna curse. Damn it, we got to get back to it. We there cannot be. We can't continuously say, well, that kid has that excuse because he doesn't have, or she doesn't have,
The skill set.
that system, or that support system. We, as a community of people that know the real issue, have to demand that from the kids that we come in contact with. It has to be demanded. It
That'll
cannot,
preach.
yeah, it cannot be, please, can you? It has to be, pull your damn pants up, be
This is what it is.
yes. We gotta be the aunties and the grandmas that we had, and not say, these kids. No, it's
Tighten
these
them up.
adults. These adults.
Carla, you girl, you're preaching, because I have had this conversation with family members who have had the audacity to say to me when I have said, why are you okay with the C's, D's, and F's? And you
Right,
know what they have the nerve to tell me? Lauren, everybody's not Andre. I'm about to slap you in the mouth.
right,
Don't ever say that to me again.
right,
It's not that Andre, and he is bright, but that was nurtured.
right.
Get your baby a tutor. Spend
Mhm.
time doing the schoolwork with him or her. I don't care if they need a tutor for every daggone class. A child can get an A. I have children that are on the spectrum that are straight A students because they have the support of family and the school to help them to be successful academically. And oh, by the way, ding, 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 ding. Colleges and universities have the same support systems in place. Even when you go to take your ACT, your SAT, do you need reasonable accommodations? Now I'm going to cuss. Damn it. Stop making excuses for mediocrity. Man up, woman up, put your big boy panties on, put your big girl panties on, whatever the heck it is you need to do, and stop settling for mediocrity. We have power and authority that we have buried in the backyard, won't even dig it up and use it, and are okay with these kids graduating from high school illiterate, but he sure can run. So we're going to let him go to college on a football scholarship. We're going to let him go to college on a track and field scholarship. We're going to let him go to college on a baseball scholarship. We're going to let him go to college on a basketball scholarship, and he's dumb as a damn brick. You know why? Because nobody took the time
Right.
to nurture the. You know how many scholar athletes came out of Salem, New Jersey, and went to college on full athletic scholarships or majorly full athletic scholarships, but because they didn't have the academic discipline and fortitude to hold it down at the collegiate level. That's Harley, you nailed it on the head. That's not the student. The adults in the school system failed them because all they did was prepare them to play the darn sport. That's all they did.
The parents also, yeah, and
But absolutely.
but then on the other spectrum, you have kids who were babied, like, when we were, I can speak for myself. When I was 15 and 16, we were considered adults. We were considered young adults,
Mhm.
and we were expected to act a certain way.
That's right.
we were given certain privileges because we were adults.
Right.
So we made our mistakes. Those privileges were pulled back. So, but now I look at sometimes my niece, God bless her soul, she's 19 and not sure of herself because she's been babied.
Coddled.
Yes.
Coddled.
And because and then I have my niece who's 12, and my mom sent a picture of her. She's almost 6 foot tall at 12.
Wow.
But she's constantly getting her phone taken away because she's doing things she's not supposed to do. And her mom says, well, that's why I don't let her do anything, because she doesn't have common sense. So I'm like, how does a baby get common sense other than making mistakes? You got to allow people to grow.
Yeah, let them learn.
Yeah, and the word teenager shouldn't. I think I would like to get that word out of our vernacular. And soon as they become 13,
young adults,
they're young adults, and that's what they are. They're young adults. It is cruel to treat people like an adult until age 18 and say, okay, now you're grown.
Right. Throw them out the nest and they fall flat on their head. head bust all up on the sidewalk.
So I want to just chime in real quick, because y'all just said a lot. Like y'all just dumped a lot on the audience. So I just want to unpack a couple of things that y'all said. So I'm gonna go back to what you said earlier, Dr. Pitts, about you being an educator and things like that. I think one of the biggest issues, and we kind of talked about this a couple shows ago, where specifically talking about Black schools, predominantly Black schools that have predominantly white teachers in them. And we talk about this all the time. Like where I live at in Chesterfield, Virginia, our capital, Richmond, Virginia, and then Petersburg, Virginia, those are predominantly Black schools who have predominantly white teachers in them. And one of the things I see all the time, and I've talked about this before, is where, these white teachers go into these schools that are in the inner city and stuff like that, and they freak out because they don't understand the culture. They don't understand how kids talk to each other, how they interact with adults and things like that. They're culturally incompetent. And Dr. Pitts, this, very well, being in the mental health field for, a long time. One of the biggest things, especially within the last 5 years, that has been harped on counselors all across the country is cultural competence. And let's be real, we live in the United States of America, but to say as a people we are united as far as culturally, that will be a lie and a slap in the face to all the various cultures across this country. Right. And I always challenge people to understand this: we are American by title and title only. But as far as our cultures and things like that, our cultures are vastly different amongst, white and Black people. Because let's be real, not to go too far into it, but what is a white person? A white person is nobody but somebody from Europe who immigrated over here from a European country, and they gave it the term white to make it a blanket statement. Just like, what is a Black person? A Black person is nothing but African people from Africa, from different parts of Africa, who came over here and were labeled as Black. So I always implore teachers to be culturally competent. If you're going to go in an area where people don't look like you, don't sound like you, don't talk like you, don't use the same slang as you, don't raise their kids like you, learn the culture. You are doing yourself and your students a disservice by going into a classroom and being culturally incompetent to teach those children. So that's my first thing that I heard you say. I challenge teachers and educators to be culturally competent of all cultures. I don't care if it's one Muslim kid that comes to your classroom, and that's the only Muslim kid you have in your entire teaching career. Learn about their culture. Learn about it.
At the collegiate level too, Ronnie, right?
Huh?
Would you agree that the cultural competence is at the collegiate level too?
Absolutely.
It's across every level of education, because goodness knows I've seen it in higher ed too, where it's like, are you serious?
Absolutely. And Ms. Carla, to your point, because you also made a lot of great points as far as the education system as a whole, and we've talked about this, and I have my own beliefs about the public education system and the failures that it's had over the last 2 to 3 decades for a lot of kids, not just Black kids, but kids all across the country who are in public school. To your point where you said that, your great-grandmother, your grandmother, all of them had adequate educations. I would even argue, I used to listen to my parents all the time. My dad graduated in 75, 76. My mom graduated in 83. But what they used to always tell us is they taught them life skills, especially in high school. They taught them how to
Yes.
balance a checkbook, how to
Yep.
go get a job, how to do a resume, how to tie a tie
Yep.
if you were a guy, how to dress professional, how to talk professional, dinner etiquette, things like that. They actually took time and taught that in school. And to your point, Dr. Pitts, when school went from preparing you for life to preparing you to take a standardized test.
Yep.
In Virginia, we call it the SOLs, standards of learning. I don't know what other states call it, but in Virginia, we call it the SOLs. And from third grade through high school, you have to pass basically all your SOLs. And when you get to high school, you have to pass at bare minimum 9 of them. But of those 9, 8 of them have to be all 4 years of math and all 4 years of English. And you just have to have one more than another subject. So to your point, Dr. Pitts, where, we talk about these kids who, school to prison pipeline that they've created with the No Child Left Behind Act of 2002, I think, or 2004, whenever it was enacted. But even then, I forgot what Clinton called it, because Clinton called it something different than No Child Left Behind. Reagan called it something different from No Child Left Behind.
Bush called it, they all had different names for
policies. So we see where, automatically kids already are put, here's the standardized test you have to take. If you don't meet X amount of requirements, so basically if you can't listen well, if you can't perform to this test, something's wrong with you. And we see this all the time, where kids, I'll be honest, for me, I was not a test taker. I hate taking tests. Even to this day, I hate taking tests. I could get an A in a class all year. When it comes to that test, I don't know what it is. Test it's just like this unexpected pressure you put on yourself. I got to pass this test. Like when I was taking the SATs, I was always told you got to at least get 1,000 over, combined score of 1,000. I hit 910 3 times in a row. I took the SAT. I couldn't pay to get above 910. It wasn't because I was stupid. I had a 3.1 GPA in high school, but I couldn't take that test. But to your point, to both of y'all's points, when we talk about the education system, and Carla, you made a great point. I think it starts at home. And for whatever reason, we've gotten to this point where parents have this assumption that they're not supposed to teach anything. They just, when a kid gets here from birth to 5 years old or 4 years old, you at home, you do with your little kid stuff and all that. But when you turn 5, that first Tuesday in September, you out the door to the bus stop, and they're going to be your teacher for 6.5 hours a day for the next 13 years. Yeah. And that's just unrealistic. Your parents, your family should be your first teacher and should be the biggest teacher in your life.
That's right.
And to both of y'all's points, and Dr. Pitts, I agree with you, but I'll also say this as far as when it comes to the public education. I feel like while there should be an emphasis on getting good grades, I always see so many times kids who actually put in a good effort, but for whatever reason, the public education school system is not for them. They just don't vibe with it. And to your point, when you're dealing with kids in the inner cities and low income areas, you see this all the time where, like you said, is it really ADHD or is it PTSD? Because for so many times I've seen kids, go to school and the last thing on their mind is school. How can I focus on my education? How can I focus on my academics when at home there's 5 other kids running around loud all night so I can't study or do my homework? Mom is working 2 jobs, or mom is arguing with her boyfriend, whoever the case may be. They throwing stuff at each other. There's gunshots out in the background, out in the neighborhood, right outside my door all day and all night because people don't know how to act. School would be the last thing on my mind. And to both of y'all's points, when we look at sports and tie sports into all of this, and I was thinking about this while y'all were talking, if, let's say, for example, in a perfect world, education was the forefront for, student athletes and stuff like that, and it was preached at home. I wonder, like, if that competitive edge for those kids who know they come from an impoverished area, know they come from, like, I gotta get it. I gotta be the one. There is no ifs, ands, or buts. I gotta be that one. I wonder if that edge will be taken away from some of them kids who feel like I said, oftentimes there's been stories out where the NFL, particularly, they will draft kids who need the NFL, not kids who want to play in the NFL. And there's a big difference, kids who want to play in the NFL or play in the NBA compared to kids who need to. And often, and it's a sick way of thinking, but these leagues feel like, well, if you need us, you won't step out of line. You will do everything you need to do to keep this contract. Whereas somebody who wants to play it for the love of the game, they're like, well, I don't need this, but I love the game so much I want to play. I look at that too. And Carl, I wanted to ask you this question as something, see, for you being a former basketball coach, because I was thinking about this, when we talk about, kids going to college and stuff like that. And oftentimes a lot of kids will pick their major before they even touch ground on campus and stuff like that, because some schools require it. But you would being a former college coach, how much emphasis, I mean, of course, make sure they go to class, get good grades and stuff like that to stay eligible. But outside of that bare minimum that a coach has to do, making sure their kids go to class, making sure their kids are eligible and stuff like that, for you as a former basketball coach, how much did it cross your mind that you were, being as a coach, being concerned with what they were studying, what they were going to do after, their sport they played in college and stuff like that? Because, I would even argue that, while these numbers, the disparities between white college players and black college players, the graduation rate, the disparity is so big, to that point, like I said, I feel like that number can kind of be skewed, because we look at a lot of these black players who go to these big schools like Ohio State, Alabama, Florida State, stuff like that. They're going strictly for the only purpose of going to the league. That's what can you get a good education from the schools? Absolutely. But do they care about that? Probably not. And I had friends who've gone to D1 level who have said, you pick a major, you might have your own personal, tutor who will do most of your work for you or make sure that your work is done correctly so you stay eligible. Not because they're trying to make sure that when they graduate, they'll have something to fall back on, but just because they stay eligible and stay on the football field long enough for them to get looked at by scouts. And I think that's a disservice too. So you being a former basketball coach, how much, I guess, vested personal interest did you have in your student athletes, making sure that, well, I see you're majoring in this. Well, what you gonna do with this major? Are you networking with anybody in this major? Do you have an internship possibly? Do you, stuff like that? How personally invested were you as a coach in your student athletes, making sure that not only were they choosing a major that benefited them, but was going to benefit them long after they were on your basketball court?
Well, I took recruiting as this. We were entering into a relationship, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're entering in a mutual relationship. You with the school, you with my program, and me and your parents, and I include their parents,
Mm-hmm.
with the promise that I am going to guide you and with what wisdom that I had
Mm-hmm.
and what I know, and help you with your dreams, help you with what you want to do. And my
Mm-hmm.
job was to keep you on track. And I was very vested in that. In terms of me picking the right major for them, I never thought that was within my purview.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not saying like picking the right major for them, but like, having that conversation where it's like I said last week, I had teammates who would just be gym majors or criminal justice majors. And we live in a world where, getting a degree like that, the chances of that translating to a job or even having a chance to get an interview.
Don't discount kinesiology and health.
Because specific fields like that, yeah. But I'm talking like I said, a lot of my teammates, they were just like, health and physical education, where they, that translates to being a gym teacher, something like that, or being able to be a coach, or something like, I mean, the bare minimum, even mass communication is like a degree. You can do a lot of things with mass communication, but let's be real. Dr. Pitts, I don't know if you are a mass comm major, but look at you, you're doing a mass comm thing. You're doing a podcast every single week on a national radio, platform. So, that's what I mean by like not single-handedly picking their degrees, but, making sure that, outside of just being the student athlete, that, they're putting themselves in position where they really think about the bigger picture, not just in the immediate, but the larger picture of their education.
Where do you go from here?
I think the job of a coach, I think the term coach is narrow, right? Well, it's general, but when it comes to athletic, I think some people think of it just on the court. If you're building if you just filling a team that's trying to get players to play who are good, yeah, all right, I'm just a coach on the field. But coaching and leading a program, everything is about people, right? I promise certain things to that kid and to their parents.
Mm-hmm.
and they trust me to take care of that. And that's, knowing how my mom cared about me, I know there's a special trust.
Mm-hmm.
So I, identifying that kid's wants, their goals, and knowing when they're getting off track, and kind of nudging them to be on track. But actually, I'm also supposed to help them grow up
Mm-hmm.
by
Absolutely,
giving
yeah.
giving them rope and room to grow up.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm sorry.
that's what I'm saying. Just gaining a relationship,
Yeah.
gaining that relationship, and not being dominant, nothing like that, because they're grown, and
Absolutely.
I'm gonna treat them like they're grown. I have expectations because they're grown adults.
Carla, do you have an opinion, having been at various levels in the athletic programs in the schools that you've coached, do you have an opinion about what the culture or the consensus is, if you will, of how other coaches view that level of responsibility? Because as you were talking, yeah, and I know we talk, but it comes up all the time. As you were talking, it took me back to Aaron Hernandez when he was at Florida, and how so much of, when you listen to those documentaries, and they shared that, the coaching staff was aware of some of the maladaptive behaviors that he was engaged in, and they made it go away. Do you feel that, dependent upon what level or size of the athletic program is, that it's easier for coaches to look the other way?
I don't think they look the other way. They may honestly care about the player, that they don't want them to get in trouble at a younger age and make it go away. I can't speak for that situation, but being at the University of Maine, Joanne was very in touch with her players, but there is a sense at that level
Mhm.
that you want to be there, and you
Mhm.
want to win. You're there because you're competitive, and there's a sense of autonomy that you're going to do the right things,
Mhm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So you're going to be in the gym shooting your shots.
Mhm.
You don't need a coach. Matter of fact, you can grab a coach and say, "Hey, coach, I want to shoot." Right?
Mhm.
There's no, all right, at this time, Carla comes in the gym and shoot. Make sure you shoot your shots. There's no babying at
Mhm.
the higher levels. There's no babying. You have to be mature.
Right.
No one is going to make sure that you go to study hall, or that you see. Now, if we look at your grades and say, hey, what's going on here? Every school has, at that level, has academic advisement, and we expect the kids to go to academic advisement. I think at that higher level, there's more of a staff.
Mhm.
There's
More,
more,
more financial resources to
right?
provide academic support. Yeah.
But there's expectation that kid take care of that for
Mm-hmm.
How many times are
or
coaches
herself.
made aware of the grades? I mean, I know you can't speak for every program in the country, but in the schools that you coached at,
Mhm.
how frequently did you all get grade information on your athletes?
Oh, I can
Yeah,
answer that one.
yeah, go ahead.
Mhm.
So now, and I don't know how this is at every school, but when I was at Virginia State, so we would have the coach would print out twice a semester progress reports. You
Okay.
got one a month into the semester, and you got one right before finals. So you got one right before midterms and right before finals. And you had a week. So they would give it to us on a Monday. You
Mhm.
had until the following Monday to get all your teachers to put a progress report, I mean, to give you a grade and what was going on in that class. And you had to get it signed and turned back in.
Mhm.
Now, a lot of teachers, now I had some teachers who, for whatever reason, just refused to sign it.
Oh wow.
And they were
Yeah,
just like, it's
yeah,
not worth my time. It's a waste of time. I'm not signing this. If your coach wants to know, they can just look, they can pull up your transcript. Well,
yeah.
if it's a new semester, I mean, well, there's no grade on the transcript. So, you would have some teachers who would, just for whatever reason be difficult about that. But that's how our coaches stayed up to date with what our grades were. And the rule was, if you had anything less than a C for on that progress report, you couldn't practice. You couldn't practice until you got another update or you brought your grade up. So that's how we did it at as Virginia State. And to answer your question about the Aaron Hernandez situation, and Carl, you gave a great answer. But I would even argue, to your point, Dr. Pitts, that at that level, at that high level of football, especially the Power 5 schools, I wholeheartedly know that those schools cover up a lot of things that their players do. Because when you're at that level, the stakes are not just the national championship and stuff like that. The stakes are millions and tens of millions of dollars, because when you're at that level, you have donors, boosters and stuff like that for the program, who are donating on average 3 million here, 5 million there, 10 million there a year to these schools, and they want results. It's no different. It's crazy because how, for whatever reason, at that level, that's the only field where making an investment, you demand a return on your investment. Like when you invest in the stock market, you hope and pray you get a return on your investment. And if you invest in certain things like mutual funds and stuff like that, there's a pretty good guarantee that you will get some type of return. But when you're at that level of football and the stakes are millions and millions of dollars, I feel like that's the only field in this country where when you make an investment as a booster, you're demanding a return on your investment. And that return will be getting a national championship, getting more notoriety to the school so they get more money and stuff like that. And they put that pressure on these 18 and 19-year-old kids who, they're, like we talked about before, they're not seeing any of that profit. Yeah. So I think at that level, and for somebody like Aaron Hernandez, the crimes he was accused of in college were egregious. They accused him of killing 2 people, multiple bar fights and stuff like that. Now, if it's just something like, speeding tickets, out partying, drunk in public, they're 18, 19 years old. Like we said, kids are going to make mistakes. They shouldn't, lose their career for making a simple mistake like that. Classic example, Baker Mayfield, when he was at Oklahoma, there was that video of him running from the cop. Now, people can sit there and argue, well, he was white and, stuff like that. So, yeah, he got tackled by the cop. But if it was a black player, it could have been a whole lot more severe. We're not going to go into all of that. But you see, a simple mistake like that, it was a mistake. He's a kid, but for what Aaron Hernandez was doing and for them to, sweep that under the rug, that speaks to what I was saying where, the stakes are so much higher. Somebody like Urban Meyer, who's highly respected amongst college coaches, I would argue that, hey, it's the same thing with politicians and stuff like that. You got to deal with some, maybe not so publicly accepted people to get your point across and get things moved. Because if you do everything the technical way and the proper way, you probably won't be that successful in the business world or that in that realm of, dealing with people like that.
Right. So you just answered my question, because my next question was going to be that when we look statistically at this, and I'm going to use the word insignificant, but I don't mean it as literal as it sounds. This, in comparison to the thousands of scholar athletes all across the country, the insignificant percentage of those scholar athletes that actually go to the draft and enter the league, then is it reasonable to say that because, to your point, the investments are so great, that the emphasis, even though the coaches get the grades, the emphasis isn't on whether or not the student athlete is academically successful beyond being eligible to play during their eligibility period? It's like, if they graduate, they graduate. I'm just worried about these 5 years that they're eligible. I could give a rat's behind if they graduate or not. And it sounds like that, clearly the onus is on the student athlete to finish strong. But because the coach's emphasis is on the athletic performance, there is no added pressure or encouragement to be academically successful beyond.
Well, that goes back to expecting people to be adults at a certain age, and because they have to know what they're getting into. So if you teach kids, hey, you're adults, learn how to take care of yourself at an early age. You can recognize certain things. You can recognize human nature. You can recognize your feelings inside and know when you need to say no and walk away.
So it circles back to the family.
And-
It circles
and
back to the foundation.
I want to make a couple more quick points before we wrap up, Dr. Pitts, to answer that question. So I don't know if a lot of people know this, but when we look at these large schools or any school for that matter, so I'll start with Division I. So the GPA minimum for a student athlete at Division I is only 2.5, which is a C plus average. That's to remain eligible. You just need a 2.5. At the Division II level, it's 2.0, but at Virginia State, we had a minimum, you had to have a minimum of 2.2 GPA. I don't know where they got the 2.2 from, and you'd be surprised. A lot of my teammates got hung up because of that 0.2. You know, a 2.0 is still a C average, but that 2.2 made a difference. So, and to your also point, you know, when we look, I always tell people this, especially for high school athletes when it comes to recruiting, I always tell them this. At the bare minimum, if you have any shot of getting looked at by a college, unless you are the next coming of Deion Sanders, Lawrence Taylor, Jerry Rice, Randy Moss, one of them play, unless you just God gifted, you stick out on the screen. When a coach pops your tape in, they see you and only you. You're like a man amongst boys. Then and only then could you get away with having anything less than a 2.5. Yeah. Because like we talk about, it's the same thing with Aaron Hernandez, R. Kelly, and stuff like that. Adults see these young kids with God-given talents and exploit their talents for their own personal gain. And that's across all fields, whether it's sports, music, art, whatever the case may be. Adults will pick up on a kid who has an extremely gifted talent and exploit them. Now, while the kid could become successful in their own right, they've been exploited for so long by adults and have this warped perception of their talent and their success that oftentimes it leads them into trouble. So the bare minimum for Division I is 2.5. However, like for example, UVA and Virginia Tech are the two big Division I schools in Virginia. UVA has a minimum GPA requirement of a 3.8 just to get into the school academically. Virginia Tech is like 3.6. But for their football team, their average GPA is like right at 2.9, 3.0. So how are these kids getting into school? Like I always say, talent versus production. You know, so if you're extremely talented as a football player, a basketball player, you have a shot at going to one of these large schools. And that's where you start to see where, like you said, those coaches, their only vested interest as for the student athlete is keeping them on the field long enough to stay eligible to benefit them, exploiting their talent at a young age, telling them like, well, look, you came here to go to the league. I know you want to get an education and stuff like that and all. And I'm pretty sure, I'm not gonna say this is all coaches. I'm sure there are coaches who emphasize education. But for the most part, at that level, those coaches are emphasizing, I need you on the field because I need you to produce. They're not sitting there saying, I need you in the classroom getting straight A's so I can keep my job. They're saying, I need you on this field performing at a high level. That's my first point. So we see that. So high school student athletes, get the good grades in high school because it will pay off instead of relying on your talent. Because all it takes is one bad injury in high school and those scholarships disappear. But if you have that 3.0, you still have a chance. My last point I want to make real quick, Dr. Pitts, and you made a great point when you were talking about the kids that you educate on a weekly basis. I've made this argument that in the last year, you know, kids are not stupid in the slightest. And Carla, you made a great point that from birth to, 7, 8 years old, most kids are at genius level, what they would consider genius level. However, to your point, Dr. Pitts, I notice this a lot, and we've talked about this quite a lot the last couple of weeks. Adults will hold kids to standards that they don't hold themselves to. So, when you see parents sitting there telling their kids, well, you need to pay attention to virtual school. You need to pay attention. You need to do this. You need to do that. These kids are also going through this pandemic. It's not like these kids are oblivious to this pandemic, what's going on, being locked at home and stuff like that. Right. And I would argue, I always say, as adults, it's your job as a parent to provide a space for your child to feel safe at all times. When children don't feel safe, their fight or flight senses kick in. So they're in survival mode. And if you're in survival mode for a prolonged amount of time, things get distorted for you. So kids see where, it's one thing for a parent to sit there and say, well, you need to focus on your education and stuff, but you out of a job. You got a high school education. You went to college. You out of a job. So you telling me to go down the same exact path you are, and potentially there could be a worldwide pandemic and lose my job, and I'm no better than you. Now, that's no fault of the parent. However, we see this system where we talk about the public education school system, and we see how the career fields are changing. Things are changing. Blue collar jobs are vanishing left and right. But we still have this mindset of telling kids, go to college, go to college, go to college, get an education. A formal, I always tell people, and Jared made this point back during the fall, informal education, meaning an education that you get on yourself outside of a public school or a college or anything like that, will benefit you more than any formal education you get, because informal education teaches you everything that both of you all highlighted: critical thinking skills, being able to survive, being able to use your own personal skills to monetize and have a healthy career and be comfortable in life. So that informal education is just as important as what we consider a formal education. But to your point, the parents have to emulate that. How can you as a parent tell your child, go to school, pay attention on a computer for 6.5 hours a day, when you're over here looking for jobs on the same computer that they're using, trying to make things work? It doesn't work that way. So we have to help our kids understand that while a formal education is great and all that, informal education is just as important, if not more important, in this ever-changing world that we live in today.
Preach.
But look, we're gonna close on that. Look, now who's dropping the mic? I mean, you summed it up. You summed it up beautifully, Ronnie. And my interpretation of what you said is that with all of this information that we share week in and week out, there's a foundation here that these scholar athletes must be able to build upon. And when the foundation is fractured, it contributes to a fractured life, a fractured performance, a fractured existence that has to be repaired properly in order for the scholar athlete to actually be able to go to the league and to be successful. Because you can be successful, very successful, on the field or on the court or on the baseball diamond, but we all know too well that you can be very, very unsuccessful in your personal life. And why are you unsuccessful in your personal life? Because the things that needed to be addressed to help you, those life skills that we spoke about that are needed to help you to make much better, well-informed, efficacious decisions, the skill set just isn't there because you either were taught it and ignored it, or you weren't taught it. So on that note, we're wrapping up for today. As always, thank you, Carla. You got to decide when you're coming back to hang out with us.
Yeah, Carl, you got to be on. You got to be on next week at least. I mean, you know, if you busy, you got other engagements. You know, I understand, but you know, we definitely love your opinion on this show.
Yes,
I really enjoyed it. This has been a blast, and I promise I will be back. I can't stay away.
Okay. So I'm going to look, folks. So for all of you that have fallen madly and hopelessly in love with Carla as a contributor to the show these past 6-7 weeks, I'm going to be sending her the updated schedule for the shows to come between now and the end of June when we break for the summer. We love you. We are so honored and count it a privilege that you were able to share this time with us. What a tremendous, tremendous value you have added to these discussions, and we are humbled and eternally grateful for you joining us. And I'm gonna send you that schedule. Don't be trying to skate out. I'm on vacation.
I'm gonna be feeling the equator, the heat of the equator.
There it is. Bring us back some sun and heat. Look, folks, thank you so much for tuning in today. Ronnie and I will be back with you next week. We've got probably another 3 weeks or so before Jared rejoins us, and we are crossing our fingers and saying a prayer that he's going to be coming back with a championship and the captains from his team, for them to be able to share with us from a scholar athlete perspective of what this journey and has been like for them, how COVID has impacted them, and what they feel about their future in amidst this global pandemic, and how it's impacted them. So we love you. We thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you next week. Bye bye, everybody.
Bye.